welcome everyone to the Donovan Live Postgame Show on WKYC's Facebook Live. I'm Dave DiMatteo, along with Jim Donovan. Everybody's back. I feel like, Russ Mitchell's back. David Herberton's back. Daniel Sereno's back. Everybody's back.
Yeah.
Dawn Kendrick's back.
Yeah, it was good to see Danielle back.
Yeah.
And she makes her presence felt and heard.
Yes. 3-on-3 is like, it's like taking up an extra notch when you get Danielle Sereno back.
Right.
Boatload of things to get to here with you on the show here tonight. First and foremost, as we're now in April, it really does feel like the draft is getting closer. We know we still have 3.5 weeks to go or whatever, 3+ weeks to go. This is a big week for the Browns. They're going to be entertaining in Cleveland all the quarterback prospects starting tonight and tomorrow with Baker Mayfield. At this point, with the rumors and rumblings that are out there, including Peter King and the MMQB this morning, that an FOD, a friend of Dorsey, and he's not the only one basically saying that friend of Dorsey thinks it's going to be Josh Allen going to the Browns. Are you still pretty much, where you've been at here this whole time, that it's going to be Sam Darnold? Any reason you have right now to change your mind?
Well, only that there's been there are always surges in all of these high draft choice, all these potential high draft choice. I mean, every guy seems to get more than his 15 minutes of fame in the build-up to the draft. So Josh Allen, for instance, the quarterback of Wyoming, he had a huge build-up in the Senior Bowl because he played in the Senior Bowl, and he played pretty well in the Senior Bowl. But everybody liked the fact that he played in the Senior Bowl. But remember, the other quarterbacks, they were doing different things at the time and getting ready in different ways. Right. But Allen did commit and played in the Senior Bowl. And, well, lo and behold, the most basic reason, none of them were seniors.
Right.
That's so they couldn't couldn't play in the Senior Bowl. All right, but then Allen kind of disappeared, and then you got into the pro days, okay? And the pro days, the first one was Sam Darnold, and he was exceptional, and he did it in the rain and everything. And so there was a surge in Sam Darnold, which I think is legitimate, and I think it's real, and I think it's very real out in Berea. And then, you had, not too much with Josh Rosen, a little bit more with Baker Mayfield because Mayfield had a pretty good pro day himself. And, of course, what he says has been very, I'm the guy, get up and go. I'm a leader. I can take your organization and make it a great organization. Just put me in the lineup right away. So, and then Saquon Barkley, of course, had the combine. Right. And more his combine than his pro day because he didn't do much at his pro day. He didn't do anything, really. So don't be surprised that you're going to have all these guys. You're going to have, you may have a Baker Mayfield surge coming up. Right. You may have a Josh Rosen surge coming up. You may have another, and it appears as though we're in the midst of another Josh Allen surge. Yes. And that's because Mel Kiper has come out and been consistent with he's going to be the #1 guy. There have been some other guys that have come out and said that. And, of course, friend of Dorsey, whoever that is. Now, I ask you folks, what kind of friend of John Dorsey would come out and give away the Browns' plan of what they're going to do in the draft?
Right, that's not a good friend.
That's not a good friend. That is former friend of John Dorsey. Yes. That would be my guy. Before we go, I'll tell you, there's an even more important thing going on in Berea right now than these visits. Yeah. And that is today, and maybe over the weekend, but certainly today, the Browns brass and John Dorsey and all of his guys and the coaching staff, they were getting together to assess their own roster. Wow. Who's going to stay?
Which is very important.
What are you going to do with Corey Coleman? Are you going to trade him? Are you going to cut him? Is it okay? Does Jeff Janis fit in? I don't think so. I mean, he fits in, but I don't think he replaces Corey Coleman. What are we going to do with some of these other players that we have on the roster to make room for what we're going to draft? And maybe we want to do a late deal as far as a trade or what we have left in free agency. So that was going on today. So tonight, Baker Mayfield is arriving in Cleveland, and now you're going to get the visits, those number 30. Right. Every team gets 30 pre-draft visits. Now, all of these quarterbacks, they are going to visit.
Yes, they're all coming. I want to talk about Rosen for a second. You've been the voice of the Browns since 1999, since the team came back.
Before he was born.
Before he was born. Yeah. You've covered the NFL for a long time. I don't know if I can ever remember a coach, and and Pete Carroll and Mark Sanchez is close, or Matt Barkley kind of close on this, but we have his coach Jim Mora Jr. Saying, basically he hopes his guy, even though he thinks his guy is the best player in the draft, he doesn't want his guy to be taken first overall, and he's had to kind of massage quotes for the last like 3 or 4 days since he first said what he said. It strikes you as weird when I think about Rosen and you think about the stuff that his coach has been saying about him.
Well, Jim Mora got fired.
Yes.
Okay, at UCLA, and a lot was expected of UCLA because of Rosen. And you wonder what went on inside those practices and what went on game days and during games with the kid. And was Jim Mora just saying, hey, listen, maybe I'd still have the UCLA job if Josh Rosen was a little bit more connected. This was a kid, and there are a lot of stories about him. This was a kid that supposedly, wasn't there a story that he had a hot tub in his room as a freshman? And there are some people that feel he falls under the category of entitled. Now, there is a scenario that kind of echoes what Jim Mora did in kind of downplaying his quarterback. Brian Kelly did it a little bit to Deshaun Kaiser last year. Brian Kelly, in an interview in the walk-up, the lead-up to the draft, said, I don't think that Deshaun Kaiser can handle the NFL right now. He should be back in school. Now, that's more of this is for the betterment of the kid.
Yes. A little tough love.
And upon further review, maybe
it's right.
Maybe Brian Kelly was right about that. But that's the only, you're right. I mean, that's the only situation that I can remember it being so kind of, damaging to a player. Brian Kelly came out later and said, listen, I was only doing it because I really liked the kid. I really think he should have stayed at Notre Dame for another year. Now, we had a box seat to how he played, and, maybe, Brian, there's some water in the bucket to what he says. Now, to the Jim Mora thing, I mean, that's all I would say right now is that they turned the lights out.
They turned the lights out on Josh Rosen.
Josh Rosen, so that would be something, he was a very, very public quarterback out there. If you're the quarterback at USC or you're at UCLA, for a lot of years, Dino, that was like being an NFL quarterback out there because those were their two professional football franchises.
Absolutely.
Out there. So you were in the spotlight an awful lot. And, of course, both of those kids, Darnold and Rosen, had huge, welcomes to the program.
Right.
They had big, big outcomes in their first few games of the program. And Rosen then suffered injury. And, he had kind of a funny year this past year.
Yeah. It's just, I just find it really interesting that even the stuff that he said to Peter King, all of a sudden today, like Peter King was in like the center of everything quarterbacks in the Browns, but just kind of made his guys sound a little aloof. Like you have to figure out a way to keep him interested. I mean, it was just, I don't have the exact quote, but it struck me as really odd when they talked about it.
Yeah, I think Darnold, for instance, and Rosen are totally different guys in personality. Darnold's kind of an aw shucks, I'm with the team. Rosen has had a lot of exposure in his life.
Right.
I mean, I think that there was a time, and you and I talked about this, there was a point where Ross Tucker, who's a national radio talk show host, a contributor on the NFL on NBC Sports Network, and does games for Westwood One over the weekends, and is around the game a great deal. And I thought that there was one time, he was a fascinating guest on the Browns pregame show one time, and he came on and told a story that Rosen really, he was thinking of he was choosing his colleges, and Duke was the one that he was kind of leaning towards because of the tutorial system.
Okay.
That the tutors were better at Duke than they were in other places. Whereas a lot of kids just say, hey, listen, I want to play, and if you're going to Oregon, I want to wear 400 different uniforms. I mean, a lot of kids base their decision on that. So he's had a very, very interesting kind of upbringing.
Well, and it's funny, thanks to Ross Tucker, he has the quote on his Twitter site about Rosen. This is the quote, again, from Jim Mora to Peter King that popped up this morning. This is about Josh Rosen. Quote, he needs to be challenged intellectually so he doesn't get bored. He's a millennial. He wants to know why. Millennials, once they know why, they're good. Josh has a lot of interests in life, if you can hold his concentration, and you can see the quote, if you can hold his concentration level and focus only on football for a few years, he'll set the world on fire. He has so much ability, and he's a really good kid.
Yeah. Well, I think maybe he had a hard time holding his attention.
I was going to say, apparently.
It seems as though there were some things going on besides football with the UCLA Bruins and their young quarterback.
That's just, when I read that quote, that doesn't sound like something, maybe I could ask the friend of Dorsey, but that just doesn't sound like a player that would be of interest to Hugh Jackson or John Dorsey.
No, I don't think so.
Very
but
much.
Let me ask you this, too. There are other agendas here, and there's an agenda for Jim Mora.
Yeah.
Okay, Jim Mora, he's a young man. I would assume he wants to coach again.
Yes.
And I would think he wants to coach at the NFL level again.
Yeah.
If he gives everybody a bum steer on this kid, Josh Rosen, who is going to, that could cost him a good wide open opening in the NFL somewhere else. So he wants to coach again, and I would think he really would like to be in the NFL. Maybe he wants to be in college again. I thought it was a funny fit when he went to UCLA.
I did
because he had been a head coach in the NFL.
Right.
So I think that maybe he's just also making sure that he's given the right info to everybody else. What happens if you sit in an interview with a potential employer in the NFL and you're Jim Mora and you've said, hey, I would draft Josh Rosen, and he turns out to be a problem child, and then someone says, hey, what happens? What about the time? How can we ask you to assess talent? Look at what you gave to so-and-so on Josh Rosen. So.
Yeah, it's kind of whether you're trying to be if he's trying to become a broadcaster or if he's trying to get back into coaching, either way, you better make sure you're given the right impression and the right evaluation.
Yeah. Well, on the other side, if I'm a network and I'm thinking of hiring Jim Mora to be an analyst, I would say, wow, this guy shoots from the hip.
Right.
And that's what the networks want.
Yeah.
They want guys like that.
Right. They weren't afraid to put it out there. So we'll keep an eye, again, the fact that the Browns are really evaluating the 53-man and the guys that are still here right now.
That's what they're doing.
With 3 weeks to go till the draft, it'll be interesting to see if there are any personnel shifts and any trades or movements here between now and draft day. But that's a good nugget from Jimmy. With that, how about we look at the Cavaliers? They've got the big game, as you mentioned on the sports tonight. They've got the big game with Toronto tomorrow. Another game with the Raptors. Another game against the top team in the East. As you look at this team, and they're not a finished product because they still have injuries. Kyle Korver has been out, and obviously he's also been out with the death of his brother. What does this team look to you? How does this team look to you in this final stretch before we start playoff action?
Well, as they are right now, when they go out on the floor tomorrow, I don't think they can win the NBA title with that lineup. But when you start bringing people back, okay, and if they're the
Hill, Korver, et cetera,
and if they're the same player that they were, before they left, then I definitely think that they can be the best team in the East, and then they take a shot in the finals.
Right.
But I think right now, it would be hard for me to see them get through the meat grinder, which I think the East is going to be a little bit more of now than it has been in recent times. I think it's going to be a little bit more difficult. I don't think you're going to be 10-0.
Yeah.
Coming through the East or whatever.
No faux.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think you're going to be in a couple of series maybe that could be interesting, and that then pushes the button a little bit more. Now you're under the playoff pressure a little bit earlier than they have been in the last couple of years, when really they haven't been pushed until the finals. Right. So, the East, you take a look at the East right now. I mean, Philadelphia's on a red-hot streak. The Celtics are starting to play a little bit better again. Indiana's playing pretty well right now. So there are some teams that are playing, some interesting basketball. Again, tomorrow night becomes a big night for them because I think the mental part, I thought that was a big game that they beat Toronto, and the way they beat them, they came from 15 down at halftime to win the game and get by the Raptors. And as great a win as it was for Cleveland, I think it was a terrible loss for Toronto as they try and overcome this mental wall of getting past and over the Cavs.
Does hanging on to the 3 seed matter a lot to this team, knowing that, first round, if they can have one of the top 4 seeds, you'll at least get home court in the first round.
Right.
Get yourself through that. Okay, great. I don't know if it mattered. We've seen in the past with Atlanta or Boston, it really hasn't mattered if the Cavs haven't had home court advantage when they've gotten deeper into the Eastern Conference playoffs.
Right, and it really didn't. I mean, it really didn't matter. I mean, last year they kind of forfeited the top spot to make sure that everybody got some rest, and really their easiest series really turned out to be the Celtics series.
Right.
I mean, the Celtics series was pretty easy, and you can say, well, Indiana, but every game in that Indiana series was a tough game for them.
Yes.
So here's what I think. I think that I think this year though there are a couple of teams that could be interesting in the playoffs. Now, a lot of them are very young.
Yes.
And it's going to be their introduction into the postseason, and you wonder, are they going to play up to playing into the postseason, or are they going to fold and say, all right, well, at least we got there.
Right.
We'll be better next year. I still don't think it matters. I think the Cavs think they can win anywhere.
Yeah, I do too.
Now, if in the finals, different thing.
Right.
Different scenario.
But it's going to be, this will be if they can get to the finals for a fourth straight season. I mean, this will be the year they've really earned it. Where, like you said, the last 3 years, it's been relatively easy. I mean, this year, if they get there, there'll be, I think, more of a feeling like, hey, we've earned it. And if they can make it 4 in a row, that's. You've got LeBron and everything. That's still a pretty amazing accomplishment. Last thing, Indians will continue this West Coast swing in Los Angeles, Anaheim, but L.A. against the Angels. Concerned about Jose Ramirez? I mean, I wonder if this finger injury was worse than what he and the Indians thought. But to have that a major cog in the lineup, and it's so early, I realize this, but 0 for 12 is still 0 for 12. I'm a little concerned. He hasn't looked, and it goes back to that we've talked about last week. That last impression that you have of a player. Well, Jose didn't have a good postseason against the Yankees.
No, I do want to say this. I didn't like the way the Indians played all weekend.
Yeah.
Okay, and what I mean by that is that beyond Ramirez, didn't Ichiro take a home run from him?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
so he hit that ball well.
Yeah.
But beyond Ramirez, I don't like when the Indians sit back and rely on home runs.
Yes.
Okay, and all weekend long they did. I thought in the opener, they just didn't hit, but certainly, Alonso hit a grand slam, and they didn't do much else beyond that.
Right.
Yesterday, Encarnacion hit the 2 home runs, but they didn't do anything, much beyond that. I like them when they're firing on all cylinders.
Yeah.
When they're hitting singles and doubles.
Yep.
And they're in
moving
motion.
run, and they're moving runners.
Yeah,
yep.
I really like when they're doing that. The other thing, beyond Ramirez again, I thought they missed Brian Shaw yesterday.
Yeah.
I think Brian Shaw is the 7th inning.
It goes back to you and Jensen talked about that last week. I mean, people are going to, for all the grief that we used to give Brian Shaw, that, every time he was out there, you're at the edge of your seat. I mean, the man had an ERA under 3.
And he appeared so many times.
Yeah.
And he was like a pitching machine.
Right.
He's out there. He's out there 4 or 5 times a week, isn't he?
Right.
And I thought that was a problem. I want to see them get in motion, though.
Yep.
And be moving. I want to see Lindor moving.
Yep.
Ramirez moving. Okay.
Yeah.
Zimmer moving. I mean,
yep.
that's the big reason why he's in there. They'll be much better when Naquin is out and somebody else is in there.
Yeah.
I mean, I really do.
I think I've seen
enough.
enough.
I hope that's Brantley.
Yeah. I think I've seen enough of Naquin. I mean, I understand he did some nice things in 2016, but I remember why like a guy like Zimmer's in the lineup and a guy like Naquin is not in the lineup when I watched some of those at bats over the weekend.
Well, and I just better at bats, and just think singles and doubles more. And the big question, of course, coming into the year was, were the Indians going to have power? And they'll have enough power, but not if they play the way they did over the weekend.
Yeah.
And I don't think Seattle is a team that really. I think they should have jumped on them a little bit more. I think when things start to sort themselves out, I don't see the Mariners being in the thick of it. Now, this will be interesting. The Angels had a very good weekend in their opening series against the A's. They're 3-1, aren't they? So, that will be interesting to see what they do. I'm looking forward to seeing Clevenger pitch in the game tonight.
Me too. They need to have, after Kluber in the opener, gave them the 8 innings, not as good from Carrasco and Bauer the last 2 nights. So I'd like to see, a nice 6-inning, stretched out performance from Clevenger, and maybe, get to a game where, the offense can get you some runs, and then you can set the bullpen up the way you want.
Yeah, I think so. You know, Bauer, once again, when an umpire squeezes Bauer,
Yep.
he gets a little ticked off, and I don't think that's good for him or the Indians when that happens.
And he specifically talked about that in the offseason, that he was going to have to do a better job of overcoming those types of things. And yeah, I mean, game one it didn't work so well, right. So we'll see how it goes from there. All right. Keep an eye. Things can happen very quickly here as we go this week between the Browns, Indians, and Cavs. We're in April. Oh, tonight, before I forget, Villanova, Michigan. You called your shot, Villanova. I think Villanova as well. But I think it could be a really good game.
I hope
Michigan.
so. I really like. I kind of got hooked on Michigan in the Big Ten tournament, and I'll tell you, the amazing thing when a team gets hot at a certain time, and Michigan, I think, is that team. Because I was watching the Big Ten tournament, and it was an early afternoon game.
Yes.
Which means they were playing a lot.
Yes.
Did they play 4 games?
I think they played 4 games at the Garden.
That's a lot, and of course then they had time off after that because the Big Ten tournament was so early. But I picked up on them in the Big Ten tournament that they kind of got on a roll at that period in time. They beat Ohio State at the end of the year. They played very well in that game. They got into the Big Ten tournament. They survived the one big scare when the kid hit the shot at the buzzer and they won the game. They are very well coached.
Yes.
I think he's
Beeline's terrific.
He's a great coach. He's been a great coach wherever he's been, up in upper state New York, West Virginia. He won a big game here in the tournament with Mike Gansey at West Virginia. He's done a great job at Michigan. But Villanova's been good all year long. Yeah.
They are loaded.
Yep.
Of course, this is also Masters Week, too. So we'll have more to talk about later in the week. All right, that'll do it for us. Again, Herv, welcome back. And thanks you all for watching the Donovan Live Postgame Show right here on WKYC's Facebook Live.